Hello again, guys. It is I, Free700. We are back with some Legacy of Kain lore. This time, what the fuck is the Turelim? This is the second vampire clan, the second most powerful in my opinion. And we're going to go over what it is that they did in their empire of Kain's dominion, and also talking about how that made them unique compared to the other 6 clans. So, here we go. What exactly is the Turelim? The Turelim, as we first encounter them in Soul Reaver 1, are these large beasts. They're actually the biggest vampires that exist, that are not the clan leaders specifically. Now, these large vampires have huge ears, huge bat-like ears. But, despite having those huge ears, we don't necessarily see them in the game using that. But it has been described that they have acute hearing. After all, their leader, Turelim, develops literally blindness, but develops these massive flaps of ears, and that's how he fights, as he listens for the slightest bit of sound, and he's able to pinpoint where you are. So even though in the game we don't see them utilize it, that's pretty much what they were going to evolve into, is these blind dudes, really, really powerful. They also have bull-like qualities. Now, it doesn't really say it anywhere in the game manual or in the game at all, but their hind legs kind of shape like that of a bull. And they also develop these broad chests, this huge body of mass. And in the game, Nosgoth, the multiplayer game that was dead as fuck upon arrival, that's what the Turelim did. They would actually charge at the humans and pin them down and just beat the living shit out of them. This is where I would say they are more like the bulls. They're this glorious knight that would just charge in and rip the enemy asunder. That's essentially the role that these guys had in the military aspect of the vampire empire. Was that while the other races would maybe hide around, skulk in the shadows, maybe burrow underground and come up and surprise the human, the Turelim were these big, knightly, glorious dudes that could easily overpower anybody. There was nothing that they couldn't overpower. In fact, the Turelim would later specialize in unarmed combat, because again, they were, in their view, the most gifted by Kain, because Turelim was the second vampire to be resurrected, right behind Raziel. So, being the second vampire, they received the second largest portion of Kain's power, of his soul. This allowed them to be much, much more well endowed than the others. So, while us in today's history may say that a girl got blacked with the BBC, these guys, the vampires, would say you probably got Turel'd with their big TC. They're pretty damn huge. They're amazingly large. Now, the interesting thing about this is that despite their huge strength, and they obviously capitalize on their bigness, their girth, they really do hone this aspect of not only am I the biggest boy in the room, but I'm the fastest. They also have some minor telekinetic capabilities. And this is really interesting because they're the first vampires we see use telekinesis with their mouths. It's kind of weird, but essentially what it is they put their hands down and they open up their mouth and they allow this high-pitched little like bong, and this little orb flies out of their mouth, and if you ever get hit with this orb, it's going to slam you into the wall and probably crush a few ribs. So it's not something to take lightly. Even their fledglings can do some minor telekinetic capabilities. Now, with that being said, were they sorcerers? Absolutely not, no. If anything, the Turelim, what made them different from other clans, some clans did specialize in magic, they did not. Instead, what they were more specialized in was being gatekeepers, being these just unstoppable walls that you could not get past. This is what they were great at. This is what they were good for. Whether it was to charge in and break an enemy, or to hold the line and make sure no one gets past them. This is what they were meant for. Now, despite being arguably the strongest vampire in all of the clans, they weren't the strongest clan per se, because many of the other clans outnumbered the Turelim. This is actually what I find very fascinating, is that their gift is so powerful that they can't really share it with everybody, like the other vampires could. The other vampires, they could just start whacking away, imbuing their power into other humans, turning them into vampires as well. The Melkahim was even suspected to give their power into the dead corpses and turn them into vampires. But the Turelim, it seemed like their recruitment process was a lot more limited. Now, it's not explained why in the game, why that is. Maybe they were just simply too powerful, too potent of a gift for some people to handle. That could possibly be it. After all, it's a fantasy universe. You give too much power to someone, there is a risk they could just blow the fuck up. This is exactly what the Turelim were, though. So, in other words, other vampire clans may have 300. The Turel clan would have only 100. It was always like a 3-to-1 ratio. This did not mean that they were behind the other clans. By all means, no. They could easily take on 3 vampires and come out slightly scrapped, but hey, they would come out on top eventually. This is exactly what kept the Turel clan even with all the other clans of Kain's court, is that they are well endowed. Unfortunately, in the Soul Reaver game, it was cut content, so we weren't able to really go to the Turel homeland and see where they lived in, but the restored content, whatever content there was of it, it was mostly in a industrial sector of Kain's empire. And despite this being cut content, so we're not exactly going to say it's lore accurate, it does seem to lend credence to the theory that the Turel may have been engineers. They may have been masterful craftsmen of the machineries, because a lot of the areas that we do see them in the game is protecting artifacts and protecting these advanced, intricate machineries. And this is where it gets kind of interesting, is that you may think, why are they guarding these engines, whether they're engines of war, whether they're engines of time, whether they're engines of just simply a bridge? Why are they guarding all these machineries? Well, this is the interesting part. Apparently, the Turel clan is extremely loyal to Kain, still, despite Kain's empire falling. Now, the other vampires aren't really there. They're not really mentally with it. They're kind of more animals. The Turelim, though, still retain their sanity. They still retain their minds. So, it has been stated by one Turelim who has been guarding a ancient secret that Kain did not really want other vampires to know of. It was stated by him, this Tomb Guardian, that Kain ordered him to protect this area. This is pretty interesting. So, what that means is that the Turelim are still receiving orders. They're still slightly receiving some organizational help from Kain. And they do view themselves as Kain's chosen, as Kain's sons. So they do view themselves as a greater vampire than everyone else, which is hard to argue seeing how big they are. And they also view themselves as Kain's favorite after Razielim's clan has been destroyed, because again, he was the first. So once his clan was dead, it was only natural to assume the second formed clan would probably be Kain's right hand. And it clearly shows, because Kain would still rely upon the Turelim, even though Nosgoth is in ruins, even though Nosgoth is absolutely devastated, there's barely any life on it. He still charges them with a duty to protect what was created by his empire, and to protect that which he does not want any explorers to accidentally discover. This is what the Turelim would do. So in other words, they were masterful engineers to some extent. They were extremely powerful, whether it was telekinetic or physical. And they seem to have a bit of an arrogance problem, thinking themselves the greatest vampires, which it was hard to argue against it. But at the same time, there is more ways than one of being the greatest vampire. Just because you're the biggest and because you have slight telekinetic capabilities doesn't mean you're necessarily the strongest. There are other ways of being, quote-unquote, the greatest. But hey, arrogance does affect all of us equally. And they were extremely loyal to a fault. It was insane how long some of these Turel have been charged with guarding some of these machinery. Some of them have been charged with over 500 years to guard a small, insignificant area that has no activity, no life. And the Turel would actually do it. They would just sit there and guard this area for a long period of time. Now you may think, well, what happened to the clan leader? He's on Soul Reaver 1. Where is he? Well, that's a video for a separate time. But essentially what you gotta know is that a time warp rift randomly occurred after Raziel was executed. And Turel accidentally got sucked into this dimension. So, with 1,000 years for Raziel to resurrect, the Turelim didn't really have a leader. So, they deferred to Kain. After all, Kain is way more suited to be giving orders than any other clan leader is. So that's where the Turelim are, and that's what they have been. Extremely powerful, extremely loyal, unbreaking, and easily able to crush their enemies with just their claws. But there are some issues like, well, their bull-like qualities, and they do still retain their sanity, but you can tell that they are a little bit thick-headed. Like, you may tell them, why are you guarding this desolate area for 1,000 years if there's literally nothing in this area that's of use? Like, the machinery has broken down 100 years ago. Why are you still here? And they'll just tell you, because I was told to. And that's it. That's the end of the conversation. So you could easily argue that Turelim are kind of a bit of a dumbass, maybe too thick, too loyal, maybe arguably too much of a meathead and not much of a brains. But I like the Turelim. I think they're pretty interesting. I think it's really nice to see a vampire clan that has these huge bat-like demonic faces and then these massive fucking thunder thighs that could just charge through you and just knock you down to the ground. I just love it so much. So, this has been Freezer 700. I am out. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys next time. As always, comment down below what you guys think. Legacy of Kain is all about interpretation, after all. Much like a book. You just play through it, you go, wow, I can't believe that happened. I think this is what it is. I think that's what that is. And you can just tell me down below what it is that you think so far. For those of you who never played Legacy of Kain, I hope you guys now know exactly what the hell these monstrosities are when you do watch a video of someone playing through it, which I would highly recommend. Some players actually do movies of it where it's just a whole 7-hour long video of just them playing through the game, getting through all the story and stuff. Really awesome to watch. Highly recommend it. Besides that, I'm out. Peace.